These were growers grown blueberries, trying to get into the school system because we want to bring good nutrients to these kids. And even like some of the high schoolers was like, man, you can't impress a high schooler for anything, but they love these blueberries. They're eating them up. The growers program, they're just good tasting berries. They last a long time and the kids love them. Hey, we've got blueberries. How many do you need? So,
yeah, my name is Jim Halbeisen, and this is my opinion.
This week's podcast, we're going to travel south a little bit. We've been messing around with the Yankees, so I think it's time for us to go south and see what those boys are up to. I'm dragging Chris Kohls along with me this week, and he's got some bright ideas, so we'll see how bright they really are. But we're going to be talking to Bob and Jesse Merck, and what I'd like you guys to do is just talk about your operation, talk about how you got started with us or with Growers Mineral Corp. And they're doing some repping for us also. Plus they have their own farming operation, so I want them to just give us a background on everything. I'm going to interrupt you, or Chris is going to interrupt you now and then, because they say that makes for a better podcast when we interact more. So about the time you boys think you got all the answers, we'll see if we can throw a boomerang in there and kind of mess it up for you. So I'll turn it over to you guys, and you get started.
All right. Well, I'm Bob Merck. I started Merck Farms. Really started farming. We cut timber on some land, our first field, in 2009. I was still working another career at that point, but I wanted to do some farming. So we decided to clear cut a field and stump it and prep it and start growing some vegetables. So started doing that 2009. Back then, of course, I was listening to the universities and put out dolomite lime and started using 10-10-10 dry fertilizer. Everything was pretty good to start out with. And then in 2012, I started using a dry fertilizer that had some micronutrients in it. Not as much as Growers has, but it had some, and it made a difference. 2015, started growing strawberries in addition to the vegetables. And then during that period of time, I would always go to the Sunbelt Agricultural Exposition in Moultrie, Georgia, as well as the Savannah Fruit and Vegetable Conference. And I would, started talking to the growers folks at those booths, and I was looking for something better. Didn't really know what I was looking for, honestly, but I was looking for something better. And I liked what the growers folks were telling me. And it sounded like their program kind of helped get things back like God designed it, which I liked. And so I kept talking to them. And in 2016, at the time, Ed Bolsher was the DM down this area. And he actually came to Merck Farms and did a site visit, and we talked about it. And the price for what I needed to pay at that point in time was a little bit steep for me. So I kind of didn't do anything, which is typical, I'm sure. And we're, by the way, we're in the southeast corner of Georgia. So I live on the St. Mary's River, which is the Georgia-Florida border. So we're right as close as you can get to Florida without going there. And so in 2018, I made my first Growers Mineral Solutions purchase from Daniel Weaver. He was the DM at that point in time. And also started using some other liquid fertility products from another company, just trying everything that might make things better. And very promptly had my first lesson in the effects of high total dissolved solids water mixing with growers. I was clueless to that. Since then, we've learned a whole lot about water and how bad water is. And after 2 fertilizer pumps being plugged up with a white precipitate that I ended up throwing the pumps away, then we learned, okay, let's get some better water. And my only option was to go with some soft water, which is what I did. And it worked. At that point, we didn't have an RO system or anything. So, we're still working along. I'm working along by myself at that point. And then 2022, Jesse joined me part-time. He was working another job, started with me part-time. And I needed the help. Honestly, it was every year it makes me hurt a little worse and get a little tireder by the evening time. So, and then in 23, Jesse joined me full time, which was a blessing for me. And we're learning and still talking to growers, still working the program. And then that year we found access to an actual ag lime spreader, which has always been a challenge for us. And we bought 50 tons of high cal lime out of Live Oak, Florida, and put it on 7 acres. And then in 24, so we're taking growers serious at this point, and it. I mean, I knew it worked, but we just had to get everything in line to be able to do it. And so then in 24, we planted our strawberry season again, and had the figured out what Neopestalotiopsis was that year, one of the newer strawberry invasive fungal diseases, and it wiped us out. Had our worst season we've ever had. Literally, after, I don't know, we plant in October down here, and then we usually start harvesting February timeframe. And by March, April, we're pulling our plants out of the ground and getting rid of them. It was pretty bad. Our vegetables were struggling that year. We couldn't figure out what the heck's going on. It was really just a tough year. And so later that year, we said, okay, we knew our lime it wasn't as good as we wanted, our calcium. And so we ordered 2 different 28-ton loads, semi-loads of lime, put that out on 7 acres each. And then we had done that. We were cruising along. We thought we were doing good. And then it started raining, and we got 45 inches of rain over 3 months. And that, now, fortunately, before we did the lime, we chisel plowed about 20 inches deep, both fields, put out the lime, and we're pretty confident that did help. The lime washed into the 20-inch deep chisel plow rows. And so anyway, we don't think we lost much anyway. And but that shut us down for the rest of the year. We were in the process of clearing a third field that's going to be about 10 acres, which is about 6 acres of irrigated land. And that shut that field down, and we couldn't even work in that field for like 7 months. So that ended that project for last year. And then Chris Coles had come down for another round. So one of our stops was to go meet a blueberry grower near here, about an hour away. And during that conversation, we started a test plot on blueberries, and the blueberry grower was having some soft berry problems, and it was causing him a lot of money and pain. And his situation was exactly what the growers program can fix. We were confident in it. And so he added, and we talked to Mr. Jim and Chris and decided he needed to add 2 tons per acre of high cal lime, which he got from Live Oak, Florida, and he did that. And so that test plot started, and we kept maintaining that test plot all the way. We're still working that test plot. And so 2025 shows up. We bought strawberry plants, 25,000 this time, from a new source in California that has not had a history of Neopestalotiopsis. And this year, because last year was so terrible in every way, not only the rain, but our crops. And Jesse would be out there looking at different weeds that were showing up, and we're doing it all in plasticulture. Drip tape, we fertigate, we foliar feed, trying to do everything right, but we kept seeing different weeds popping up, and Jesse kept looking at them on a picture of this app, and in every case, the weeds showed that they were due to like heavy metals and things like that, which was kind of strange for us, but we're trying to figure out what's going on here. So we decided in 2025, okay, we are only using Growers Metal Solutions, Growers Nutritional Additive, and high cal lime. That's all we're using, and that's all we've done. And we can honestly say that we are confident at this point in time that growers and high cal lime is all you need. We don't need the other stuff. We tried it. It didn't help us. We thought it was helping us. We figured out it didn't. We had our best season that we've had in years, probably ever. Now, there are a few exceptions to that. There's always exceptions, but we had our best season. Strawberries did great. Veggies are doing great. So we're confident, and in the future, we're only growers in High Lime. That's our program.
So what other vegetables are you guys raising besides, the berries themselves?
We're doing sweet corn, and we tried something different this year. You always have to try stuff, and we bought a drum punch planter last year, and since it's Jesse and I doing all the work, and we're doing everything in plasticulture, because down here we just didn't have any luck with bare ground overhead spray, so we were doing everything in plasticulture. So we were punching seed through plastic, with the exception of potatoes and onions. Yellow sweet onions. And so with punching seed through plastic, we did not have great success with broccoli or peppers or tomatoes, but we had good success with sweet corn, squash, zucchini, cucumbers, round green beans, flat Italian green beans, and purple whole peas. And so we filled up our fields with that because we'd done more strawberries. So that's kind of where we stopped. And then we did have potatoes, and we had yellow sweet onions. And so, we've learned some about monosem and vacuum and the smaller seeds. So we'll probably try again, because we think it could be related to that. But the smaller seeds we had the most trouble with. But our other crops are doing awesome.
So Jesse, what's your opinion? You talk about the metals.
Yeah.
You're using high grade ingredients to formulate the growers to keep those metals low. Where does calcium fit into this whole program, in your opinion? I mean, if you're going to give credit to growers and the calcium, how are you going to do that? You're going to split that up, or what's your take on that?
So, as I've been listening through Doc Tejan's book and, talking to you as many times as I can, it seems as if you get the calcium base saturation up, and it's going to kick those heavy metals out of the soluble complex, so they're not taking them up into the roots. So getting the cal levels to the right spot, and then ultimately having those kind of dormant in there, obviously getting our oxygen in there so that our microbes can bloom, and getting a good rhizosphere space under that plastic. Some variables we're still kind of thinking on in terms of black plastic versus a white on black, just to kind of reflect more sunlight as we're seeing more intensity issues. And I think that might have been one of the factors behind some of the seed not popping up with the smaller seed. But we also, through that last rain, had lost a good bit of sand soil in that field, and we had to fill it in, and we basically were already in the process of digging a little pond at the bottom end of field 2. So we moved a lot of calloid material over there, and ultimately, we're convinced now we need to put more cal down, because we've got, probably in some sections 3 or 4 feet of clay material that needs more lime so that it can increase that porosity, because we got kind of a lopsided feel where the top side might be more sandy and the bottom side might be more clay, or water sand.
That's very interesting, because when you come to my farm, that sand, we call that our sissy dirt, because we can grow anything in that. But man, you get in that high colloid stuff, boy. I think you've got that interpreted correctly, man. You got to get that calcium in there to control that, and everybody wants to look at the soil test and know exactly what you guys are doing is what you need to do. You got to get those rates on, and then let the soil talk back to you. Right. I think that's.
And we've got an idea too this year, because one of those spots is relatively sloped, and I've, just listening to Tejan's, in certain scenarios, that calcium will travel down that slope, and there's different stuff we got to consider, but we're prepared to kind of almost build it up a little bit more and terrace it on that edge, and then try to grass it good with some rye. We had a good test with some rye seed in between plastic this year on that side, and then a complete nightmare with weed, normal weed seeds over in the strawberry side. But it was so wet at that point, we couldn't get the rye seed down for it. So we basically did a test over in field 1 and are feeling relatively good about putting rye in between, and that helped a lot with keeping the good stuff up there, but mainly just holding it in, especially on that slope. But we got to do a lot more work, probably get some more sandy. We've got some good topsoil that we're working on stuff out on field 3 right now, that 10-acre field he's talked about. And we've got some really good topsoil that we want to try to mix in. And then we're probably going to go another 10 tons on that bottom at least, just because there probably is about 4 feet of clay in that, in some of that. It was unreal how much rain we got.
Well, I'll tell you, I was just on a conversation with a gentleman saying they got problems in North Dakota with the stand of sugar beets. Well, some of his people, they've got some fields where they've actually got the calcium on in good numbers, but where they use the cover crop, they didn't fry it off with Roundup or Paraquat. They basically went in and mowed it and then physically incorporated it. And I've encountered that with farmers in the past. There's something in that green tissue that those microbes really need. And so that's something you got to kind of figure out, because you look at my grandfather, it was alfalfa 3 years, and then you mow-boarded it in, planted it to corn, and then just you had a great corn crop. So again, the cover crop has got its place, but again, we got to see how to use it correctly. And that, don't forget that green tissue. When you feed that to an animal, to a ruminant animal, who's eating it first? The microbes in the rumen, see? So you may be feeding those microbes in the soil the same way. Another question that was popping into my mind, you guys start talking to this blueberry guy about putting on limestone or calcium. I mean, that's a no-no. And how's things going for that gentleman, or what's he seeing?
From what I've heard, as I've talked to him, it's starting to kind of shift, and everybody's getting a little bit wiser to the need of cal in the soils. There's still a huge push for talking about pH and worrying about pH, but even then, it's starting to kind of climb up from. We're testing, we're sending stuff up to Mr. Jim, and he's like, "There's no calcium in this." I'm pretty much straining water out of this soil. It's not full of anything. Yeah. In terms of what their agronomists are saying, they're coming around to it, and some of the warehouses up there are starting to carry high cal lime more often than not and renting out spreaders. But I would say, they're still going to be harping over pH more than they should. It's a good test. Right. Like Tejan says, we're not going after pH, but at the same time, calcium saturation is more important. And with him, he was just on the verge of probably moving away from it if he couldn't continue to fix his issues, because, the grocery stores don't want soft berries, even though they're ripe berries and they're typically good, even if they are soft. But at transit times and all the different challenges with getting stuff to the grocery stores, kind of starts to hurt. And so far from what his report is he's probably reduced his soft berry throwaway to about half of what's normal. And that's just with 2 tons per acre of cal. And he went from that test plot too and just decided to buy it for his own home farm and spread a bunch over there and went straight onto the growers program. And there's one cool testimony where he had these small plants in this one spot in his home field, and he had been hand feeding for about 2 years some granular dry fertilizer just to try to get these guys to put on green growth. And after 1 year of cal and growers, it's putting on green growth, and it's just been basically a stick sitting in the field the whole time. Wow. So there's some significant changes, and I think the foundation is obviously building on calcium in that soil, and then the growers is just a superb program that isn't hurting that young growth, especially if you're doing it correctly with a nice mist.
See, what's so nice about that is the quality issue. This is something we've talked about for years and years, and everybody has pigeonholed us on this. Quantity is what pays the bills. And our livestock guys find out that, man, when you get the quality back in that forage, those animals perform totally different. Maybe they don't give you more production, but you never see the veterinarian. And you see, this is a situation with this gentleman. When you got those, you don't have significantly more production of blueberries. You just have quality blueberries. And that's what the public's looking for now. And we see this whole idea of what the what's the quality of what they're consuming, and how is that affecting our healthcare industry?
Absolutely.
This thing is coming fast.
Hey, I got a question for you guys. Tell us how you market the product that you grow and how you've helped out this blueberry guy, because I thought that was an interesting aspect of what you guys are developing down there.
Yeah. So pretty much what kind of ended up forming, and we're in this mode of, we're relatively small compared to most. So we're more heading towards direct to consumer because we don't have to deal with middlemen and whatever else. So I got invited up with this grower to the Georgia nutrition event, where the nutritionists from all the different county schools come up and they get to know each other and look at all the different vendors that provide stuff for school systems. And we set up there, with Blueberries, and basically met some good contacts, and then it led to us buying a refrigerated cooler trailer so we could keep it at the proper temp and look like we're professional, not just carrying it in the back of the truck bed. Which it ended up being a good purchase for that reason. But so we started taking them to the schools. This, I think at first, they're not in Rapid Eye. They were in High Bush to start with, and so they were picking High Bush, and we took about 3 pallets worth of blueberries and kind of delivered to the school systems just to see what people thought. And these were growers grown blueberries, and we got some really interesting reports. So, we were trying to get into the school system because we want to bring good nutrients to these kids. And even like some of the high schoolers was like, man, you can't impress a high schooler for anything, but they love these blueberries.
Wow.
So,
wow.
they were eating them up, and, we've learned a little bit more there. I kind of had a gut feeling. I was like, this isn't going to be as easy as they say. It's not going to be like every week they want the same amount of blueberries, and that's kind of what happened. But it's based upon their different funding pots and all sorts of different intricacies of grants and whatnot. But still kind of pushing forward and trying to market and expand it out. But so far, there's a good report for the growers program. They're just good tasting berries. They last a long time, and the kids love them. So it's now just going to be the continued process of trying to find more leads, a larger list of people that I can reach out to say, hey, we've got blueberries. How many do you need? So, we can maybe hopefully at some point in the future have 4 pallets of blueberries and get them to the school systems or wherever else they might go. But
so hey, I'll tell you right now, guys, I got 4 teenage grandchildren, and I'll tell you, if you're getting their attention, I'm impressed. So I would say you must have something that is really doing a job, in my opinion.
Well, the last time I was down there with you guys, we went over to that strawberry grower over in southern Georgia, on the other side of Georgia there, I think. And he was on the growers program, and he was selling to the schools as well. And there was a big strawberry producer in that same county, I guess, that was producing strawberries. And the schools had to buy, I guess, 1 week from this guy and another week from the other guy. And their reply was, hey, 1 week the kids eat up all the strawberries. The next week they throw them all away. What's going on here? And I said, that's the best grower's testimony I've ever heard. So,
that is an absolute fact too. And they quit buying from the other grower.
Did they? Good.
Yeah. And they were picking, he was sending all he has 40,000 plants, 2.5 acres packed in there, and he was selling them all to the schools.
Nice.
And they were taking every one of them.
So, hey, one thing I would like from you guys is give us kind of a protocol when you're using growers' mineral solutions. What's your approach? Transplant, foliar feeding, how do you foliar feed? And then you can chat a little bit about water, as far as the foliar feeding. Bob kind of touched on that as a problem in the beginning, and see, that happens to a lot of people because water chemistry is not that well understood in the industry, and so we really try to help people. So just give us some of your growers' protocols on the different crops that you're working with.
Well, we typically fertigate all of our plastic ground strawberries and vegetables, and in a lot of cases, 2 gallons per acre per week, pretty religiously. We have done 3 gallons per acre per week if we feel like they need it. I've done more than that on occasion. But typically 2 gallons per acre per week is what we do. Fertigation on both fields. Usually do that in one shot. And then we try to also foliar feed with another gallon or two once a week as well. And we have an A1 mist sprayer that we bought a couple years ago, and so we're doing the foliar with a mist sprayer. So, and the reason we got that is so, like for vegetables, you can't drive over them, or at least we can't. And so, at least I can drive down and blow through it. And I usually blow, like we have things set up in quadrants, so I usually blow through one direction, turn around the other side, and blow back the other direction just to try to get the coverage. And of course, that's really important if you're putting out any kind of pesticide, insecticide, or fungicide.
Are you mixing the product with any pesticides at all, Bob?
On occasion, only we started out only doing it if we needed to,
Right.
but we're finding that every year, because we had the Neopestalotiopsis that killed us last year, and there's some indication that there's some of the spores in the ground this year, even with good plants. But this year's nightmare was a chili thrips invasion. I just heard about them like 2 months prior. It's a new invasive insect from Asia. And as far as I know, we were the first strawberry grower that was blessed with an invasion of them. And it turned our entire strawberry field bronze color, our strawberries. And now Jesse would still eat them. He's pretty tough on eating anything and
just
trying
go
it
for it.
raw in
Hasn't
the
hurt me
field.
yet.
But anyway, obviously you
Still tasted good.
yeah, it still tasted
Just
good, but they
ugly.
just don't look right. So we ended up paying a crew, 7-man crew, 7-man and woman actually, 3 different times to pick our strawberries clean and throw them away in our peak of our season.
Wow.
That hurt significantly.
2 or 3 months
that was
gone.
tens of thousands of dollars we lost, and still had a good season, surprisingly. But not as good as it should have been. But anyway, that kind of stuff is what has been a nightmare. So because of that, we are of the belief, at least down here, that we're going to be on a weekly spray program from now on.
So what do you do? Are you doing like a jar test to see if the mixing is okay? That tends to be an issue. We tell guys, if you're putting something into the growers, like an insecticide or a fungicide, you got to do that jar test. Is that something that you guys do religiously as far as when you're mixing products?
Well, some of these products we've done them before, so we haven't done it recently.
Yeah, but you've
We've
got
done that in the
experience.
past.
Yeah.
Right. And we haven't had a problem with
They're
that.
usually, such small amount of ounces, and then he's very much religious in terms of going at nighttime and doing a spray program at nighttime because we don't want to mess with the pollinators, and that's been very effective.
So what about the water? Are you still with well water, or have you gone to the RO, or you're acidifying your well? What are you doing there?
Well, for the sprayer, we're still using softened water because that's our only option. But for fertigation, we've done jar tests with the well water. We got pond on one side and well on the other. But we're using well for all the mixed tanks. And Jesse's done jar tests and all, and we actually learned a lot at the last annual meeting when Matt sent us through that exercise, which was awesome. And so Jesse's been doing it. He did that to blueberry grower, couple different fields, and he's done it
He's
here.
got perfect water. He's just lucky. It's like 100 ppm for him.
We wanted to bring his well home because it was
Seriously.
perfect.
Yeah, but they've got aquifer fed. I think most of the time they've got deep well.
Yeah, it's deep well. It's aquifer. Floridian aquifer. We don't have that here yet, but it's a matter of time.
Right.
Sure.
But we haven't had any trouble with our fertigation lately, but we're also putting more growers in the 30-gallon tank where we're mixing it than I used to. So we figured let's do a higher dose of growers and then do it less often. And that seems to take care of that problem for us.
And some things just to note with the test, our well water, which is not a deep well, 500 ppm, pretty iron rich, definitely got the sulfur smell, but the pH is relatively low. So I'm sure that helps as we mix with the higher quantity growers. And then once it gets to the pond and aerates and all that, pH was at 6.8 and then 380 ppm in our pond. So it's definitely hasn't hurt us. And yeah, we were pretty, careful to do jar test. And for a long time, we used a non-ionic surfactant to actually mix it, just because that would have worked out better when he was doing lower quantities of growers. But then we were like, man, it'd be nice to just do growers and not have to worry about anything else, because, you don't want to spend money if you don't have to. And that's where we tested it out with the full-on well water at 500 ppm, and the ratio that we were looking for didn't have a reaction. So we were able to, we're mixing it relatively quick and pushing it immediately. So we haven't seen any negative results from it at that high ppm.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Some guys, they don't realize that you'll get interaction over a period of time. So once you get her in there, man, get it out of there. That helps with this water situation. But you guys feel that the water chemistry that we've kind of focused on with our reps has been helpful for you guys.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Huge. Yeah. We got to probably do more of it. Yeah. And I like, with Matt Gooden educating on agitation and especially too, we're pumping from a well into a pond, and it hits air and hits sunlight, and it makes you wonder exactly what's going on there. And I've tested in certain scenarios, we've got kind of like a clear pipe that feeds in the grower's mixture, and it hits some sunlight as it goes there, and then mixing it up and just trying to get it nice and agitated. And I think there's something to be said there, but obviously more testing. And that's kind of the goal for me as I succeed into the farm, is just more testing opportunities. And that's where Field 3 is going to come in, just wanting to mess around with more products and see what's actually at play by cross-referencing different applications of calcium or different applications of growers, because the goal is to save money in the long run and not have to put out as much. So, and we're still promoting that.
Where are you at, Jesse, with the calcium side of the equation? I mean, if you got a guy that is kind of interested in what you're doing, if he were to come, and talk to you about it, that first application, what kind of strips do you want him to use to compare to each other?
I'm thinking we went with your rec when it came to the blueberry grower at the 2 ton per acre, because of the potential for nitrogen to release as soon as we did that, just to not have too much soluble nitrogen hurting the plants.
Sure.
And that worked out really well for him. He's going to turn around this year and go to 3 tons per acre. But, for all the guys up north and in different soil types, we're sandy. So it's a totally different ball game over here, and sand cultures are easier to play with because there's not as much going on. But pretty much, I think what I would love to test on some of these same spots would be like a 2 versus a 4 ton per acre, just to see the difference between that low quantity, because just the sandier soils they're gonna have different stuff in their soil. They say after 6 inches of rain and you put granular down, that granular is gone, apart from whatever the plant took up. I don't know exactly how true that is on some of these areas that might have a cover crop underneath and whatnot. It might hold it a little bit better, but just kind of staying within that low zone is probably what I would recommend as we do another strip.
Okay, if he's got established blueberry plants, are you just spreading this lime right on top of the ground? Are you doing any kind of incorporation like an airway or a rotary hoe or anything? You're just letting the water percolate that down into the profile. Is that true?
That's what we did. Yep. They've got a pivot, so he was able to do that, but we got a lot of rain too, so it was able to beat it in. So yeah, I mean, we've thought, he's been interested in doing gypsum as well, and we're talking. We've reached out and talked with Chris Carter about pecan trees, and he had a grower that specifically was more interested in gypsum just because it was able to penetrate in a lot easier, and they were struggling with that high cal lime. But with the blueberries, it seemed like the high cal lime was fine, and it kind of slow released almost.
I'll tell you, you got a brother up in the Carolinas, Terry Norris, has some guys up there that have blended gypsum with their high cal product up there, which is almost like an aragonite. And part of that is the expense of the gypsum is part of the problem. and they were able to buy the high cal cheaper. But that blending effect seemed to work very, very nicely. Those guys got very nice reactions out of that. And what levels? You're back to the strips, boys. I mean, the one gentleman was using like 1,000 pounds of gyp, and then maybe a couple ton of high cal, or 500 pounds of gyp and 1.5 tons of high cal. But it seems that it has like a synergy with it, that the gypsum is more soluble. Everybody wants to give the sulfur credit, and I'm not taking any credit away from sulfur, but it just seems like there's a synergy there. So if you start looking at gyp that way, look at it individually, but look at it in a combination with the stuff you're getting over there at Live Oak. You might see some things that are kind of interesting. So,
Yeah.
One of the things we're kind of excited about is our field 3 we talk about that we're clearing right now. It has not seen any fertilizer.
Yep.
And so it's going to be our first field that we can actually do some of these tests with and hopefully get some good data over some time.
yeah. See, it's this biological thing is where the issue is, guys. You know, we got to get the proper species of microbes that live in that symbiotic relationship with the crop. And see, different crops are probably got different symbiosis types of microbes. So again, you've got to let the crop and the soil talk to you. That's the thing that I think a lot of guys don't like about our program, because we don't give them a prescription. We said, you know, you got to let your crop talk to you. And that's really the best way to figure it out, in my opinion. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you guys
I think that's I think that's an important point too, as we're doing the 2 gallon of growers per acre, per week, is we've got that sandier soil. So it's going to be a little bit different for us as we're dealing with our sand cultures.
Yep, no doubt. No doubt.
Well, it's really neat to see how you guys progress too. I've been coming down there for 3 years when you guys first met you guys, and saw the farm then and saw it last year, and we'll see it again this year. And just the troubles you've been through, the challenges you've been through, the frustrations. You know, last year, I know how frustrated you were, and I don't blame you one bit, but it didn't deter you a bit. You guys just went right back at it and tried to figure out what went wrong and how can we improve it. And that's what I see you guys doing. You learn by your mistakes, and not mistakes, but what nature handles you, and you try to adjust and move forward with a positive attitude too, and then look for various other ways to enhance the business that you're developing there. Tell us a little bit about your stand. I know that's gone really well for you this year, and you're continuing to develop that. So tell us a little bit of how you market through your stand there.
Yeah, it's a U-pick farm to date. That's all we've done. Field 3 may change that. We may have we-pick products here, but we've got a shelter and an enclosed trailer that we kind of work out as our office here in the field, and people just come to the fields and go pick. We point them to whichever field they need to go to for whatever crop they pick, and come back, and we check them out right here under our shelter. And we have a good clientele base. They come from hour to an hour and a half radius. We're right above Jacksonville, Florida, south of Brunswick, Georgia, and we've got good following. Our biggest problem is just having enough crop, honestly, for the people that want to come get it. So we have to regulate our openings based on crop availability.
Right.
And most people get it. And most people also know that when we say we're going to open, be there when the gate opens.
That's right. Goes quick.
There you go. That's a good thing to have.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been an interesting rise, and social media has been a huge component with it. That's Dad started that a long time ago, and it's just built up and built up and built up, and you kind of just have that credibility that helps out a lot. But more than anything, this year has just been everybody's just loving the strawberry taste, and the sugar content's just there, and everybody says it's like, man, the grocery store you can't taste anything. It's, you come out here, you're spoiled forever, and that's kind of what we're hoping for. We'll spoil them, but
there you go.
And especially too with talking about expanding the market, wanting to have growers grown stuff, getting a list of people who are doing it this way with cow and growers, so that we could either resell products, but mainly too for us, we want to grow it all here if we can. because it just seems more and more like direct to consumer is going to be the way for especially farms our size, but even bigger farms. We've got a bunch of friends around here who succeed a lot on getting the actual customers out to the farm and going back towards the old school way of you find your local farmer and you buy from them, rather than it all being based upon big consumer chains that are they're spending stuff all over the country.
Yep.
And the produce quality, strawberries and vegetables has been good, and it's been better since we were on this program, and people recognize that.
Right.
And the shelf life is better. Our onions, which we don't grow Vidalia onions here because we can't call them Vidalias anyway, so we grow a Texas Legend, which is a yellow sweet. To me, tastes just as good. My wife's had them 5 to 7 months and they're still fine in the house, puts them in stockings, but our shelf life is excellent. And we attribute that to the calcium and the quality of growers.
Yep.
Excellent.
Okay, gentlemen, Russ is frowning, so that means we got to cut you off a little bit here. So it's been a great run. We're going to get you back again. We'd like to have a little chat with this blueberry guy to make sure that we're not fabricating anything. So, hey, we really appreciate interacting with you guys. You take care.
Yeah, have a good day, guys. Appreciate
Thanks,
you.
y'all.
Thank you.
This podcast has been brought to you by Growers Mineral. Please visit growersmineral.com.